All right, I'm going to hit the button. And we should be live.
There we are.
Are we live? Do you have it open?
I haven't got it open. I'll let you watch it.
All right. Hi, everyone. I think we're live. I hope so. I hope that someone can confirm in the chat, please, that we are audible. Mike, do you want to just say hi so they can check your mic as well?
Hi, everyone. Hope you can hear me okay. It's coming through clear.
Thanks, Mike. So everyone can hear us, yeah? It's kind of important. It'd be a shame if you can't hear us.
I'm sure they'll let us know as soon as there's any technical difficulties.
Oh, Archie. Hello, Archie. Archie's confirmed that we're live, and it seems like they can hear both of us, which is a bonus. I'll try not to speak too much today. So hi, everyone. My name is Brian Waters, the founder of the QTube, which is a community for and of composers. Started last year. We have just about 7,000 members right now all around the world. We provide lots of free resources, videos to rescore, networking opportunities, educational stuff, competitions, and we're doing more and more. We're now offering a showreel creation service for composers to make bespoke videos to help you showcase your music and so on. So this is a new step for us, another freebie from the QTube, which is a masterclass with Mike Ladouceur. Is that right, the pronunciation?
Perfect.
Oh, good. And so, yeah, without further ado, everyone, I will hand over to Mike and let him introduce himself and introduce what we're about to present.
Cool. Welcome, everyone. So there may be some familiar names and people in the chat. If you're any of my students, feel free to just give a wave. Give a quick kind of introduction about me. So I'm a composer. I've worked in a lot of different kind of AAA film and TV, various roles, writing additional music, orchestrating, and then a bunch of my own projects, of course. And then I currently published by Warp Publishing. And so I work with them on a lot more sort of bespoke stuff. And they're sort of more of my kind of day-to-day. And I also teach. So I am a professor at both Royal College of Music in London, as well as Cambridge University. And I teach film music curriculum at both. And I've taught there for about 4 or 5 years now. So the years start to blend together a bit. But it's so I teach a lot of this curriculum, and it's something that's kind of been refined quite a lot. So I'm really excited to kind of share it with you, because it's also what I want to present tonight is something that I find kind of creeps up a lot, and is something that's not really discussed or understood that easily. So I hope that it's quite informative tonight. So just to give a quick kind of intro to what we're going to be talking about tonight. First off, just want to kind of, for the sake of it being a bit more interactive, feel free to just reach out with questions kind of as we go. I think if you don't understand something, it's better to sort of address it then and there. But then if you have more general questions, you can save those to the end. So we will have a sort of Q&A that follows. But yeah, as we're going, if there's something you didn't quite catch or you didn't fully understand, just mention it in the chat. Brian's going to be monitoring it, so he can just kind of interrupt me and raise that, and I can go over it. And I also want to talk about kind of on the topic of the curriculum. One of the sort of big things that we're going to discuss or announce tonight is my online course, and a very special offer that we're giving to everybody sort of with the QTube and anybody who's kind of watching tonight. So I'm offering a special discount to anybody who is who kind of goes through this link, or to members of the QTube, giving 40% off of my course. So this course is something that I've been working on for most of this past year, and put together really as a way to kind of condense a lot of the curriculum that I've been teaching for years. and into a really sort of succinct method of how to score film from start to finish. So I think the best way to kind of go through it is to grab a clip from the QTube and then sort of follow step by step. There's some assignments that are kind of listed through. And so I just want to kind of mention that right at the start. I'll kind of talk through it a little bit more, and we can chat about it at the end as well. But I've got this online course, and all the information should be sort of updated in the description now. But you guys can check that out kind of once we finish. And along with this 40% off, I'm also going to offer a one-to-one lesson with the first 20 people that sign up. So I'd kind of encourage you, if you're keen on it, to join and then go through the course and then bring that into the sort of one-to-one. So we can kind of make the most out of that. Along with the course, I'm offering free updates for life. So it's something that I think is important and I care about, is that I plan on updating this and adding things. And as certain, materials evolve and stuff like that, I'll continue to change and update this. But once you buy in, you're in. And I'm never going to ask you to pay for this course again. As I add more units and that kind of stuff. So I think that's just an important, ethically that I'd like to kind of have. Once you're a part of it, you're always a part of it. It's more of a community that way. And something that I do with the course as well is that every other week we have these sort of Zoom calls that are streamed to Twitch where you have a chance to kind of get some feedback on your work and that kind of stuff. So there are other opportunities to get some direct feedback from the work that you're doing. So anyway, I can kind of mention a bit more about that later, but want to jump into tonight's topic. So the main sort of topic, as we've sort of mentioned in some of the promotions, is on spotting. So just to kind of clarify, what is spotting, first of all? It's really, in the most basic sense, it's where you decide music is going to go and where it's not going to go. Besides just deciding where sort of your start and end points are, I think of spotting in also how you structure that music throughout a scene or throughout a part of that scene. So I think this is one thing that comes up quite a lot. And if people don't address this first, it ends up kind of causing more problems for your cue as you write it. So a lot of people, when they're starting out, might start attempting a cue, kind of put it on and try to just write music linearly through it. So I'm going to chat about a way to sort of take a bit of a step back and give you more of a kind of clear process and method of how to approach that, in particular to the structure. So what I've got up, I'm going to just share my screen now, and then we can swap that over. So I've grabbed this clip from the QTube. This is Caminandes, and this is the third one in the series. Brian can correct me if I'm wrong, but this clip, we'll watch through it, but it's a short kind of animated bit. And it's got quite a lot of different things to it. It's got a little bit of start, stop, some action. It's also got a bit more, kind of heartwarming sort of drama at the end. So there's a few different points to this. And I want to chat through how we can start to break it apart and come up with a kind of plan of how to write for this. So first, I'd look at the kind of macro structure of any clip. And why don't we watch through it quickly, and then we can start to kind of break it down a little bit. So let me just quickly make sure that I meant to check before. I need to be outputting to Zoom, and then I think this should work fine. So you guys can let me know if you're having any problems hearing this, but we should be good to go.
Quack, 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 quack. Quack, 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 quack.
Great. So now we kind of have an idea of what we're sort of looking at. When I talk about sort of structuring, first, once again, I'm going to start with the kind of most macro scale of this. And I try to break it down into what are sort of the major kind of acts of this clip. So if I look through the beginning, so we've got this kind of intro, and it's going through. I'm trying to think of kind of what is going on in the story. So far we've just got this character. I think it's meant to be maybe a caribou, but correct me if I'm wrong. And just looking for food. And so far, even though these penguins have come in and sort of taken all the berries and everything, he's still looking for food. So that hasn't changed whatsoever. This moment here is quite interesting when the eyes go wide all of a sudden and he sees danger because he sees the little penguin about to get hit by a train. So I'm going to kind of mark that and think, okay, that might be an interesting point because it's where something in the story is really changing. Again, the whole opening up to this point is still the caribou looking for food. If the film ended there, then that's all that would have happened. So I can look at this as maybe a sort of turning point. So next I'll go through, going to kind of look at this. So now I'm sort of looking at there's danger. Danger of trying to maybe save this penguin. And we find out he just grabbed the berry. Now the penguin's upset. So now we have this kind of chase that's sort of happening between them. They're both sort of going after each other and still trying to get these berries, but now they're kind of fighting with one another a little bit. And all of this is now, we've got a lot more kind of action going on. So I still see all of this as kind of the same. All of this action. And then as we go through, this is where the action kind of calms down. Now they're both sort of safe again. So, and then this changes from kind of looking after this penguin to now being a bit more sort of sad and dramatic. So this might be an interesting kind of turning point as well. And then this last section is about this caribou being sad and sort of looking for, acceptance and kind of finding it within the family of penguins. So the first thing I'll do, again, with this macro perspective on it, I'll put out a couple markers. And so I've decided that just based on what the story is telling me here and trying to think, if I only had this section, if it sort of opened on from here and it went through up until that point, then it just would have been this caribou and the penguin having this sort of action sequence where they're both sort of chasing each other and trying to get these berries. So then this last section, again, is kind of isolated because now it's more of this sort of emotional family sort of section. So I'm going to put a couple markers out. Again, it's kind of my large scale markers. So I'm just going to drop one roughly there. And then again, roughly here. So now I've got kind of Act 1, Act 2, Act 3 of this section. So the next thing I would want to do is start to kind of zero in on these a little bit and try to figure out how I can kind of break each of those up. So within this first section, I can see, is there a difference or is there a kind of sub turning point that happens within here? And I'd say probably around here where the penguins start to rush through. This changes things for the caribou. So without it, it's just this opening. Again, if the film ended there, it'd be a very short film, but it would only have one idea that happened. Then the penguins change it. So that kind of starts the turning point towards the next kind of act. So I could then I'm going to create a second marker track. If I can, there we go. So these will be kind of my acts. And then this can be my story beats. So I think of these as kind of story beats are more of like a subsection within a section. So the story beat can be these smaller changes of where something happens. So it'd be maybe around here. It's kind of when that first one takes them by surprise. I'm going to put one roughly there. And I'm just roughly marking this out. I'm not trying to get specific with the timings or anything like that. All of that can come later. Trying to sort of fit the timing, fit the meter, the tempo, all of that. I can sort it out later. But I'm not so concerned. So we've already got the difference in the structure here. So now this next section is the longest, and I probably have more of the kind of different subsections to cover. So I can start here, and then this is all kind of one idea, is the train coming for the penguin. So that probably ends about there. Oops, let me put that on the correct track. Then we've got just this little kind of play between the penguin and the caribou until the next bit of action. So I can kind of decide all of this is a little bit playful. It's all kind of the same idea once again, until then we get this drop. I might put in some more subsections in a little bit. So this starts kind of the big sequence here, where it's really energetic. And then I think this is also a sort of subsection, because up until this point, really the caribou's face is kind of giving a lot of this away. It's sort of spoon feeding us kind of the difference in these actions. So I think going from here to here, I'm going to put another one here. So this is a shift that we can mark. So then he's really happy, but then now he sees the sad eyes of the penguin. And so I think that's another point that we can mark out as a sort of change, either there or just before. I'm just gonna give myself a little bit more space. So we can mark it somewhere around there. Again, I'll worry about the specifics later. And then kind of, we know that the action sort of stops here and we can take a rest. So somewhere around here, I'm going to put in my next kind of story beat marker. So that should then bring us up to kind of the end of this act. So now in the last section here, we can get this sort of melancholic section. And that goes through until here, until he gets hit with the berry. So I think that will be a change. And then there's this kind of question of what's going on, pretty much until this cut, this dissolve. And then I think that will kind of carry us through to the end. So I can just look through. Again, I could even put in maybe a subsection here. Kind of this one. So we've got kind of this interaction between them, 1, and then we get kind of interaction between them, 2. They're sort of the same idea, but just done differently. So I can think of that as one idea, but maybe a subtle shift just to mark that middle. So now I've got a whole bunch of markers, a whole bunch of numbers, but what do they mean and what do I do with them? So I think now that I have this structure, I can start to think about how am I going to kind of populate this. First, I need some material. And if you check out my course, I actually have the first unit of it is there available as a free preview. And I talk a lot about kind of coming up with themes and writing suites and coming up with that initial material. So you can feel free to go and check that out. But that's what I would do from this point, is to come up with a sort of theme and a suite that I can then use as material to mark out through the rest of this scene. So those themes and suites really create the kind of narrative vocabulary that I would use throughout this. So when I talk about creating a section that has a lot of action to it, I'm going to be pulling that material from that initial thematic idea. Or this ending section, I'm going to be using the theme in a particular arrangement that can reflect the mood of what I need there. So that would be the next thing that I would do here, is come up with my thematic material and the sort of narrative vocabulary. And then I can start to put this in. So I can now look at each of these sections and think, what type of arrangement would I need to fulfill each of these? So again, I haven't written a note yet. I can kind of just make these notes for myself to come up with this plan. And I think maybe one of the most obvious is the very end here. So the reason I think this is kind of obvious and maybe easier to do is because music will take the biggest role on the screen. Music will be telling a lot of the narrative. It will be telling a lot of the story. So it's maybe a little bit easier to just have a sort of broad sweeping theme here. So I've made a sort of set of notes for myself where I can go through and have this kind of mark out, okay, from this section to the end, I have a sort of broad sweeping arrangement of that theme. And then what might come before it, maybe something a bit light and sparse to kind of connect these sections together. Really basic notes for myself. But again, it just gives me a kind of roadmap. And then what might happen here, again, maybe something that's a bit obvious. I could have a sort of melancholic version of that theme. So now I've already kind of mapped out this third act. I can go back through and start with here. So maybe I want something that is a bit more pastoral. That can work quite well for this opening. So I've just marked pastoral version of the theme. And then from this section, it's a very similar idea. So maybe I want to continue with that pastoral idea, but make it a bit more sparse and maybe a bit more kind of bitty. So I can have some of these start and stops and sort of get around the picture a little bit. So then I have this first bit of tense action. So this can kind of ramp up. I know I'm going to need some sort of an energetic version of that theme and maybe some different rhythmic figures in it. So I can kind of just make a note of that type of thing I might need. Then here, these next two sections are going to need a bit more sort of sparse music, but just connecting these through, kind of connecting that section through. Again, not too concerned with the specifics at this time. I know kind of where I can fill out the easier parts and then come back and see what needs doing. So then here is really the main action sequence that builds through. This is going to be the most energetic bit. So I can get an idea of kind of what's the level of energy that I'm going to need for this. Then we might get this shift. So I could have a kind of happy version of that, or a more positive version of that excitement, sort of as it's coming through the air here. And then I could have maybe a sad version of the same kind of material. So again, just marking what kind of ideas might I need. And then as we come down to this last section, something that is, again, maybe a bit more sparse and light. What happens here might be similar to what needs doing here. So I can kind of think of that as just some idea that I would need to have material for. So that was a very rough overview of what I might need, but this tells me now the types of things that I'll need to sort of build into that suite. So I can come up with a theme, and then once I have that sort of melody or that progression, now I can put it in these different arrangements away from picture. So I've sort of done the homework and done the research of trying to figure out what type of material I'm going to need, and then what kinds of arrangements it's going to need to go into. So again, very sort of quick run through of this, but what I've got is I'm going to just activate my other project here, which is a cue that I did for a film, so I can sort of talk through this a little bit more in the specifics of kind of how to approach this in a scene. So while this is loading up, I've mentioned that we need to mark a lot of specific points. And so how do we actually achieve that technically? We do that with changes in the music. So these can be big changes in the music. These can also be more subtle changes in the music. So when we have a big change in the music, it's essentially putting a spotlight on that moment and saying, this is what I look at this, pay attention to this section. This is really important. Or we could have a very subtle change in the music, which could just be changing one layer, or subtly changing the harmony or reharmonizing something. So you could think about this in terms of kind of what hit points or turning points are more important than others. So within the last example, I had these different marker tracks. So these acts are really more important. So kind of on the hierarchy, the changes that happen at these acts are more significant than the ones that happen within these different story beats. So I can think of that as a kind of guiding principle where the music will broadly be quite different from here, here, and to here. Whereas then this section from here to here might be quite similar and could have a much more subtle change in the music happening. So what I've done is I've got this kind of clip up from this film that I did called How We Live. Some of my students have probably seen this a bit before, but it's also, I do a full breakdown of this theme kind of within that free unit included in the course. So you can check this out to kind of see a sort of full breakdown of what's actually in this theme. Before I sort of show you through this, I'm just going to play that theme for you. So you can hear then kind of where a bit of this material is adapted from. So here's the main theme from, or it's Lucy's theme from this film I did called How We Live. Let's start from the beginning there. Cool. Thanks for your questions, by the way. So Brian was sort of feeding me a few while we were listening to that. So one, I won't get into it too much kind of about the theme itself, because you can go watch that breakdown, the walkthrough of the theme. And again, that's a free preview, so anyone can go check that out. But just a little context about the film. It's it's Lucy's theme, and Lucy is the main character. She's a teenager who's sort of living on the edge of poverty. And the film is it was a sort of charity-led project to try and show how easy it is for a lot of young people to sort of slip through the cracks in the systems in the UK, and how vulnerable they are to exploitation when they live in poverty. So Lucy's character is someone who is essentially kind of homeless and sort of bouncing around between her friends' places, and is having to deal with a lot of adult situations that are sort of beyond her understanding and maturity. So that's a lot of what is sort of in the theme. And again, you can check out the walkthrough because it explains it a lot more in depth. And just another quick question on that. The solo cello line, that is the wonderful Peter Gregson, who recorded for this. So he's a fantastic guy, an incredible player, and I was lucky to have him involved in the project. Just to kind of then jump into what's going on here, what I've done is, so this is kind of some variations that I've made for this cue. Also just addressing, there was another question kind of about warp time and stuff with markers and that kind of stuff. I'll sort of jump into that a little bit towards the end in the Q&A. So we can kind of address that, like how to kind of fit to hit points and that kind of stuff. It's a good question, and I've got a musical answer for it. So just jumping back into this, what I've got here is a few of the textures from this theme. And what I've kind of laid out here, so this area is kind of just a work area. It doesn't have anything to do with the picture. This is just a way for me to create some of these kind of different changes within the music. So again, what I was just talking about before we listen to the theme is, how do we mark different points within the film? We do that through making changes in the music. And we can do that along that hierarchy of where something is a more significant change, then we can have a more significant shift in the music to bring a bigger spotlight to that moment, or a much more subtle shift to keep it kind of out of the way and slightly less noticed. So what I've got here is, you can kind of see, I've got this first version, which is really just the chords on a synth pad, plus I have this sort of music box that's got some distortion on it, and I've got a harp. So it's just kind of playing through. These are just some of the chords and the kind of textures that are playing through the back of that. So I'll play through that a little. And then this next section, I'm just adding one layer. So I'm just adding in this, I've got this sort of synthy piano, and I'm really just making a kind of middle texture out of the opening interval of that theme. So this is just, again, a slight variation on this. So that just offers a very subtle shift. And then for this next section, now I've just added the piano theme on top of it. So I can see kind of how much of a difference this makes from the previous to this. So in a very basic way, the reason I've sort of laid this out to demonstrate is that now I've got kind of one layer at a time. I'm just making these subtle changes. But if I had jumped from this arrangement directly to this, it would be a bigger shift. It would be a bigger change. So now I've got a slightly bigger change. I'm going to add a sort of synth bass line. I've taken that piano out again, and now I'm going to change the texture. So as the sort of harp and music box come out, I have these string harmonics that come in. So, and then what I've kind of done here, where I'm getting the idea for these arrangements, you'll sort of see when we look at the scene together, but just kind of different moments where I think the arrangement needs to be a bit darker or more tense rather than more sort of neutral and open. So then I'm going to add another layer of intensity. I'm bringing that piano back, and I'm taking this harp figure, and I've sort of double timed it with the strings, just some spiccato strings. And then this is just a tag at the end. So now I've got all of these, this variety of different kinds of arrangements of varying intensities. This is a little bit more energetic with the strings. This is more tense with the sort of bass line and these sustained harmonics. This is much more neutral and open. So I've now created kind of just like a range. I've got this sort of spectrum of colors and sort of moods that I can play with. So I'm going to jump back over to the scene. And before we play it with the music, I'm going to just play through the clip with the dialogue. And you see, I've already kind of marked out these story beats up here. I'll kind of explain those a little bit as we go. So in this scene is just where Lucy is helping her grandmother. They have to go to a food bank to go pick up food, and it's something that she doesn't want to do. They have to kind of walk for miles. They don't have a car, and then on the way back, they run into a sort of nefarious character, and this is someone who is starting to sort of potentially groom Lucy. So Lucy feels really uncomfortable around this guy, but her grandmother is a bit oblivious to it. So let's just watch through the scene, and then we can sort of analyze it a little bit.
Oh, she's a good neighbour, Sandra.
Yeah.
But I didn't realise, you know, I thought it'll be the church. It'll be the church one.
Did you not read the sheet?
Well, no, I didn't, love, because they don't do that.
Oh, whatever you're after. Just give us a shout. I can deliver. Oh, yeah.
Oh, are you, Stephen?
Give you a lift home if you like.
Are you sure?
No problem. Let me get your bags.
Oh, your back's stunning. We've been walking for miles, haven't we, Lou?
It's not that far now.
Hey, we'd be quicker than this. Hey, it's a lovely car. You must be doing well for yourself.
Doing okay, yeah?
Yeah.
Got a couple of takeaways now. Everyone likes pizza.
How's your nan? Still going to church bingo?
Yeah, she's sound.
I haven't been for ages. I could do with a good win. Stephen's lovely. I've known him since he was a little lad. Oh, smash. Got a letter from Mummy.
So that's the scene. And let's kind of break it down a little bit. So as you see, I've marked out kind of different story beats here. So this first story beat is them walking together. And so again, they're just having this sort of chit chat. You know, again, Lucy's a little irritated by it. So then this is kind of the turning point of action, is when they run into this character, Stephen. So we see them kind of notice him, and it changes the action into what might happen. Otherwise, they just would have walked home and it would have been the same exact thing as what's going on here. So this changes the scene. So I've marked that down as a story beat. And then from here, this is this kind of chit chat. She's, catching up, and we can see that Lucy is she's a little apprehensive. She's saying, it's not that far to walk. We don't need to take a ride. It's fine. But then around here is where she knows she has to get into the car. So I sort of just dropped this story beat roughly there. And then this is kind of the acceptance. So again, this is a kind of turning point leading to the next part of the scene. So I know that I need to mark those story beats out with changes in the music. So what I've kind of laid out here is some different options. So I'm going to first play through the cue as it is, the way that I wrote it. And then I'm going to talk through some different decisions, things that I could have done, and why the version that I'm presenting now is the best version that is suited for this scene. So here's with both the dialogue and the music.
Oh, she's a good neighbour, Sandra.
Yeah.
But I didn't realise, I thought it'll be the church. It'll be the church one.
Did you not read the sheet?
Well, no, I didn't look because they don't do that.
Oh, whatever you're after. Just give us a shout. I can deliver. Oh, yeah.
Oh, are you Stephen?
Give you a lift home if you like.
Are you sure?
No problem. Let me get your bags.
Your back's done in. We've been walking for miles, haven't we, Lynn?
It's not that far now.
I would be quicker than this. Hey, it's a lovely car. You must be doing well for yourself.
Doing okay, yeah. Got a couple of takeaways now. Everyone likes pizza.
How's your nan? Still going to church bingo?
Yeah, she's sound.
I haven't been for ages. Could do with a good win. Stephen's lovely. I've known him since he was like a lad. Oh, smash. Got a letter from Mummy.
Ooh, can you read it to us?
Cool. We've got a lot of questions about sort of tempo and lining those up and stuff. Thanks for sharing those, Brian. So I guess the first one is sort of how do you decide on your tempo? And again, I sort of start with something that's a bit loose. And really, I just take this from the film. So because I've already got my material sort of laid out, when I'm thinking about how I'm going to arrange that initial thematic material for the picture, I'm going to kind of watch through the scene a little bit. And usually you kind of get the pace from the way that it's edited, or from the action on the screen. So if I did this, let's just do a quick experiment. I'm going to throw this tempo up and just sort of see the result of it. So if I make this kind of like 120, it'll be a bit ridiculous, but we can now watch that through. I'm just going to mute the voiceover from now on. So now this is a bit too much. I know that this is way too energetic for what we're seeing. So I kind of feel that pace just based on kind of what I'm getting from the picture. So let me drop that back down to where it was. And Brian, I forgot the second question. I think we might start holding some because otherwise I'm going to lose them all in my head. There was some specifics too about kind of like stretching tempo and stuff like that. I'm going to kind of cover a few of these all together. But what was that second question you asked me, Brian? Yeah, so story beats, it's an important one to touch on again. So these story beats are just different points of action, and they're sort of turning points within the scene. So I'm just deciding that I went over kind of looking at the last clip, where is the story changing? So story is the most important thing. So as I'm thinking through this, what is actually happening in the story? Lucy's walking with her grandmother. Try to bring it down to kind of the most basic log line of what it could be. So Lucy and her grandmother are walking back from the food bank. That's happening until here. Now it's Lucy and her grandmother are having a conversation with Stephen. And I know that Stephen is a bit of a nefarious character. And then that's happening until around here. Now Lucy has to get into the car with Stephen. So that's how I'm deciding where these different beats in the story are. And that's how the writer would be sort of imagining this too. And when they're thinking about kind of, this is part of that storytelling language of how they're sort of splitting the scene up and thinking about what is moving, what's that next bit of action that's sort of moving it forward. So very good questions. I think the other ones that are a bit more specific to kind of like tempo stretching and that kind of stuff will be covered. I'm going to sort of talk through like how you actually sort of fit hit points, how we get more specific. I can sort of go over that in a little bit. Very good questions, guys. Thanks for, I think it's great. We've got a lot of kind of interest and activity. So just chatting through kind of on topic here with what I've got for these different sections. I've chosen to start with this very neutral kind of opening. And we can play with this, just what if I tried this with the sort of piano melody over the top? Because there was another question about kind of, do I duck around dialogue and that kind of thing? Here's a very broad example of where I'm avoiding dialogue, because if I throw this piano theme in, it's going to compete.
Oh, she's a good neighbour, Sandra. But I didn't realise, you know.
So it's getting in the way. It's distracting me. It makes it harder for me to hear what they're actually doing, what they're saying. And so that's important for me to avoid it, not just because the piano is in a kind of similar frequency and range, but because it's also busy. So at this point, the music would be too active if I had the piano theme there. So I've got this going along, and again, keeping it quite neutral and sort of open. Then when I hit this, I just need a subtle change. I need to mark this because now the story changes. Now it becomes talking to this nefarious character. So I decide to add in this sort of lower synth line.
Oh, are you, Stephen?
Give you a lift home if you like.
Are you sure?
No problem. Let me get your bags.
Your back's stunning. We've been walking for miles.
So this helps just to keep propelling it forward. And again, I'm kind of grabbing that out of Lucy's theme. So this is just that opening interval turned into a kind of lower mid sort of harmonic line. So what if I say took the bass line and I moved this over as well, and sort of put this here because I wanted it to be sort of darker. Then let's see if this sort of gets in the way. Take it back a couple bars.
Oh, whatever you're after. Just give us a shout. I can deliver. Oh, yeah.
Oh, are you, Stephen?
Give you a lift home if you like.
Are you sure?
No problem. Let me get your bags.
Your back's stunning.
So it creates a big shift, but I think more importantly, it kind of gives it away too soon. So if I had that bass line and now it creates it and makes it very dark, it sort of says it right on the nose, this guy's a bad guy. But that doesn't align with Lucy's point of view because Lucy doesn't quite understand what's going on around her. She doesn't fully have the maturity. She just knows that she feels uncomfortable around this person. So I think that's a bit too much. What if we brought the piano line in here?
Or whatever you're after. Just give us a shout. I can deliver. Oh yeah.
Oh, are you, Stephen?
Give you lift home if you like.
You sure?
No problem. Let me get your bags.
Back's done in. We've been walking for miles, haven't we, Lou?
It's not that far now.
Hey, we'll be quicker than this. Hey, it's a lovely car. You must be doing well for yourself.
Doing okay, yeah.
So the piano line here is in line with this sort of melancholic point of view. But the issue is that, again, it's a little bit too busy here. And so why doesn't that work? Because we're already getting the same information this would deliver from the picture. So the picture is already showing us that Lucy is a bit uncomfortable. We hear it in the dialogue, that it's something that she's a bit apprehensive to doing. So by using her theme, which is telling us that same thing, I'm sort of having two people tell the same story at the same time, and it becomes harder to understand. So I don't need that. Instead, I just have this much more subtle variation just to mark this point and push the story forward. So then this next story beat, I need a sort of bigger change. Because if I was to think of these in a kind of hierarchy of turning points, which one is more important? The turning point to the third story beat is more important than the second one, because this is where Lucy's actually forced to do something she doesn't want to do. So now I'm able to bring in a couple different elements and change the arrangement a bit. So I let it evolve over these 8 bars into something that is a bit more tense. So it goes from being a bit more neutral and open to more tense. And I introduce this bass line here to sort of show that this guy, Stephen, is a bit more of a kind of nefarious character.
Hey, it's a lovely car. You must be doing well for yourself.
Doing okay, yeah. Got a couple of takeaways now. Everyone likes pizza.
How's your nan? Still going to church bingo?
Yeah, she's sound.
I haven't been for ages. Could do with a good win. Stephen's lovely. I've known him since he was little lad. Oh, smash. Got a letter from Mummy.
And then here's just a little tag to kind of help me suture this into the next scene, just to kind of be able to hang over and let that have a smooth and unobtrusive exit to the scene. So again, here, if I want to make this a big change, let me sort of go bigger. And I'm just going to try to sort of throw the kitchen sink at it and see what happens. So what if I put the melody in here? I'm also going to add these strings. And while I'm at it, why don't I throw a key change at it? And let's see what could, if I want to make a big change, let me make a really big change. So I'm going to bring all of this just up a step. So we now have a direct key change. And let's see how this works.
Hey, it's a lovely car. You must be doing well for yourself.
Doing okay, yeah. Got a couple of takeaways now. Everyone likes pizza.
How's your nan? Still going to church bingo?
Yeah, she's sound.
I haven't been for ages. Could do with a good win. Stephen's lovely. I've known him since he was little lad. Oh, smash. Got a letter from Mum.
So it's way too much. So the issue here, the reason it doesn't work is because, again, I'm sort of drawing this huge spotlight onto this moment. So now the music is really sticking out in a bad way, and it becomes detractive from the story and from the picture. So that's just sort of a quick way to cover this and to chat through some of these ideas of sort of how we first need to find the structure within the scene, and then the way that we shift with the music can dictate that story, can dictate how much of a change and how these story beats go from one to the next. So this example is covered a lot more in depth in the course as well. So I talk through this a little bit more specifically. And there's a lot of other topics and different examples of different projects that I've done where I sort of walk you through all of these steps. So in this masterclass, I just wanted to give kind of a quick overview of some of these topics and really try to hone in on this idea of the structure coming from the story and how we pick and pull that, and then ultimately translate that into our music through some technical changes, through the arranging and understanding this sort of hierarchy of what might be too much, what might not be enough, so that you have more of a concise system of how to approach a scene. So I think that's mostly kind of what I wanted to cover here. Again, we've got some questions. So before we jump to the Q&A, I just want to sort of highlight the course one more time. I'll just sort of pull it up just so you can see sort of what I've been talking about. If you go through the link, you can see we've got the Academy. It's just through Teachable. You can read a little bit about me, some of the stuff I've worked on. And then you can preview this whole first unit. So this is just a free preview. Go check it out. You can get an understanding of kind of how the course would be, see if it's the right fit for you. And then I've got these different units laid out. So we go through all about programming, these different concepts of sort of how to produce really high quality demos, how to polish them, creating dynamic textures. And this one on stems is really specific to film. As someone who has spent hundreds of hours printing stems for other people, I found a system that works for me where I would never need to hire someone to do that. And it really just comes down to clever routing. So I sort of talked through that a little bit. Then talking about setting music to picture, we go more in depth into different story beats, how those can then command the story, and then talking about music editing, setting that up, creating a draft, reconforming, putting the cues. And then these units are sort of after the music has been approved, how you're going to clean everything up, prepare it for recording, who's in your music team, how do you structure that plan? So this is something, again, I've been fortunate to spend hundreds of hours in Ayr and Abbey Road recording for different big projects. And it's often been my job to make sure that we record everything. And how you organize all of that with different cues and different sections on different days has to be very specific and can end up saving a lot of money. So I talked through kind of how I did this for my own album that I released last year, and sort of how that plan works, particularly dealing with sort of union rules and that kind of stuff, so you can get the most for your money. And then in this last unit is more the finishing. So how you can do some home recording, how you can spruce up your own demos before you get to a big studio, and then mixing and finalizing your tracks. So there's quite a lot sort of packed in here, and I tried to make it quite concise. Once again, we're offering, there's a 40% off through the QTube. And that also helps the QTube out. So there's an affiliation there. So supporting it through the QTube also gives a donation to the QTube and lets Brian keep doing all the wonderful things that he's doing. And once again, the first 20 people who sign up through it, I'm going to give a free hour-long one-to-one lesson over Zoom. So once you have a chance to go through the course, you're going to get some one-to-one time with me, and I can kind of help you through these things, along with the bi-monthly sessions that happen where you have a regular chance to kind of get some feedback. So why don't we open it up to the Q&A? There was a few questions in there. And so I want to kind of go over some of this stuff and make sure that, that I can help you guys with that.
Yeah, I've got a few questions, quite a few questions, Mike. I hope you've got a nice cup of tea there.
I do.
All right. So I will try to be the question master, and if I miss anybody, you can repeat your questions again in the chat, no problem.
You can also, just as a quick note, when I do these bi-monthly, so every 2 weeks I'm doing this sort of feedback session, I also stream those on Twitch. So you can also, that's a chance for you, even if you're not in the course, you can go on Twitch and you can ask some questions and follow along.
Yeah.
So I like to do that too. That way there isn't, a paywall to just get a question answered.
Yeah.
So
cool. Okay. Many of the questions are kind of generic questions, so I wanted to leave them to the end, really. So one of the fundamentals, which I think I've answered correctly, but I just want to double check with you, is the course, people can basically start whenever they want. They can do it at their own speed. There's no schedule per se, right?
Yes, great question. So it's asynchronous, which means that you can go through those videos at your own pace. With each of the videos on each of the units, I've got a number of assignments through it. So as I sort of mentioned at the beginning, you can grab a clip from the QTube, and then you can use that as a sort of basis to follow along each of those sections. So you can go through, create a demo, make sort of your main theme, compose your suite. Then you start stemming it out. You start putting that to picture and creating your own kind of temp track. And then off of that, you can conform and create the draft of your cues, recompose, do some home recording on it, mix it, finalize it. And then at the end of this, if you follow it along with all of those assignments, and you can, again, do it at your own pace, then you'll have a really polished product, a really polished video that you can then share in your reel. And again, ideally grab one from the QTube. It's all there so that you can do it and put it on your website, not have to worry about rights or anything like that. So yeah, it's a really good question. You can work at it at your own pace. You can join anytime. And I'm going to be kind of adding units and updating things over time. So once you buy in, you own it for life. And you can always come back. You can always join these feedback sessions. So it's always there for you.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. And thanks for the question. And thanks to those that have signed up so far. We've already got some people signing up. So
a few lessons to give out already.
Yeah, absolutely. Some people are going to get those free one-to-one sessions. So there's a few more left. So grab them now. I'm going to try and roll a couple of questions into one, really, because they're kind of interconnected. Which is, what do people need in terms of A, knowledge before they start the course, and B, does it assume that they're using Cubase, or are they able to use other DAWs and that kind of stuff? So what are the basic requirements?
That's a great question too. So I tried to curate this in a way that you don't need to have a master's in film music in order to start this. It is really quite basic in terms of just being able to compose a theme and work through things. If you don't know much about programming or working with samples, that's covered. So, and I think it's really, even if you are quite familiar, I think it's important to go through the sort of foundational concepts of programming. Because often I've found that with many of my students over the years, they might start with a way that they've gotten used to working that's sort of digging holes for themselves. And so kind of clarifying a really clear system of how to actually work with samples and how to get the most out of them is really crucial. So you don't need to know much about that going into it. Just a basic understanding of music, really. I mean, if you've never written anything in your life before, you can still start it and it's there to kind of help you. But I think if you're, used to starting and writing your own music, that's great. But if you've never had any sort of formal education, if you've never, gone to college for music or something, this is still for you. So I've tried to do that in such a way that it's really accessible. It's really about bigger concepts than it is specifics of kind of working within that DAW. And that's kind of following on the next question too. Work in whatever DAW that you like. These concepts are broad, and I was careful to try and talk through things in a way where it's not just Cubase specific. If you use Logic, great. If you use Pro Tools, fantastic. Ableton, you name it. They all pretty much do the same things. So it's really just about how you figure that out. And there are parts of the course where I talk about recording and I'm using Logic instead. That's just the way that I work. I mostly write in Cubase. If I'm doing some home recording, I tend to do it in Logic because there's some things that are just more intuitive in Logic. And then there's sections on sort of prepping in Pro Tools and that kind of thing. So yeah, it's quite open in that. Those are great questions.
All right, cool. Thank you. And thank you, questioners. Again, I'm going to try and kind of wrap two questions into one, which is to do with almost like the absence of music, which is who decides which scenes require music and which don't? Is it yourself or the director? And also kind of overlapping a little bit, how do you deal with the music not overpowering the dialogue? Do you do that through levels, or do you do it through the arrangement, or what basic thoughts can you offer on that?
Great questions. So I'll answer the second question first, which is arrangement. I think that's more important. You don't want to have a busy arrangement that you just make quiet, because if you end up at the dub stage with that, if it somehow got approved up to that point and it's just quiet, it's going to just stay quiet or muted altogether. Really try to find the musical solution to get around dialogue and to not get in the way. Think of it in terms of, and this is something that's also sort of covered and touched on in the course, is about what percentage of the screen you're sort of taking up when you're writing. So an example I use in some of my lectures is like if from the film Darkest Hour, there's this big, speech where Gary Oldman is delivering Churchill's speech to Parliament. And it's that speech and that dialogue is really the main focus and the main thing that is telling the story. If the music came up and was this big heroic idea, then it would be competing with it. So the music in that scene and everything else in that scene, the lighting, the cinematography is quite subtle. So it sort of stays out of the way of what's going on. And you could apply that to other things. So if, say, a film like Blade Runner 2049, or even in bits of Dune, something like that that's visually stunning, there's moments where the cinematography and the lighting is really telling most of the story in that moment. And it's best to kind of stay in more of a background role. So it's understanding where music has to come up and sort of take the lead and tell that story, and other times when it needs to tell part of that story in combination with the other elements. So in short, the arrangement, how you arrange the music, not with levels. With levels, that would be, again, you'd just have something busy but quiet. And could you remind me of the first part of that question?
Yeah, sure. Who decides which scenes require music and which don't? Is it yourself, the director, or a bit of both?
A bit of both, I'd say. It really depends on the project, when you come into that project. So, in some amazing collaborations, you might be brought on very early. So if you're kind of working with a director from, the script stage before they even shoot it, then you can play a very big role in these decisions. But sometimes, and this happens at any level, whether it's a short film or a Hollywood blockbuster, you could be brought on and the film is already cut and they've pretty much got it laid out. They know exactly what they want. So a lot of those decisions are no longer up to you, and you have less to say about it. But I would say you always have some say, because if there is a point where you think, I think this would actually be much better without music, or, the sound effects or the dialogue are already doing what we need it to do, and you think there shouldn't be any music at all, or you think the music should take a much smaller role than the temp or the director are kind of planning on, then do what they ask. Always do what's asked of you first, and then you can offer an alternative solution. So deliver the thing that they wanted, and then deliver your alternate view and back it up. So then you can say, actually, I think this would be much better in a more subtle way because it helps enhance the story this way. So I think that's always, and if you're sort of starting from the beginning and you're deciding kind of where the music should go, or you have a more direct say, you can do this sort of with the director together. You can probably find interviews of John Williams during spotting sessions from Star Wars on YouTube and that kind of thing, where they would sit and go through it all together. I've seen sort of less and less of that. It's more like the music editor might have made those decisions in how it was temped, and the director has kind of put it together with them. Or you and the music editor might have made some of those decisions and sort of presented that to the director. So it can really vary, but I think in any of those scenarios, as long as you understand why something should work and what the purpose of the music is, then you have a strong case to make.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mike. Great answers, great questions. Thank you, everyone. There's still more questions, Mike. Don't go away.
We've got time. I'm not in a rush.
By the way, I just want to let you know, Mike, because I know you're not really following the live chat, that there's a lot of really nice positive comments about both the course, about the masterclass, and about the pieces of music that you shared with us. So that's all really nice.
Fantastic. Thank you, guys. I'm happy that you enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I like teaching and I like sharing this stuff, and I really just want you guys to get a lot out of it.
Yeah. And I just want to again, a question for me really about the discount and the affiliate link and so on. That's going to be kind of indefinite. It's not just for like today. So, I mean,
That's a good point to make. Yeah.
We'll continue to offer that discount, but of course, only the first 20 will get the one-to-one sessions. So, good reason to try to sign up today.
I if only I had all the time in the world. But
Indeed. There's a question here which I think you've covered, but I don't know whether you want to add something. Can the absence of music also work as a big or subtle change?
Absolutely. So, while I've got it up, actually, I can just do a quick example sort of with what we were just watching. So this is also covered kind of in the course. I talked through this as more of like a subtractive approach. So say I mute this, I'm going to mute these sections too, and come down. And now I'm going to cut out these textures, and we're going to go down just to these synth pads, and we can see sort of how that affects it.
Or whatever you're after. Just give us a shout. I can deliver. Oh yeah.
Oh, are you Stephen?
Give you a lift home if you like.
Are you sure?
No problem. Let me get your bags.
Your back's done in. We've been walking for miles, haven't we, Lou?
It's not that far now.
I would be quicker than this. Hey, it's a lovely car. You must be doing well for yourself.
So this completely changes the point of view of that scene now. And in a way, it almost makes Stephen look like a good character, because now it becomes a little bit more sort of neutral. This texture before kept it a little bit busy, more confusing, especially with this sort of distorted music box. So it's actually sort of lightens it up. So that can definitely have a big effect. And if I go in here and I'm just going to keep that first chord on the change, but then I'm going to mute the section that follows. And so we can just let the music drop out altogether. And we'll see sort of how that changes this effect. So now if I jump back to here.
Or whatever you're after. Just give us a shout. I can deliver. Oh yeah.
Oh, are you Stephen?
Give you a lift home if you like.
Are you sure?
No problem. Let me get your bags.
Your back's done in. We've been walking for miles, haven't we, Lou?
It's not that far now.
I would be quicker.
So again, it absolutely serves as a change in the music. So that can be a tool, sort of silence or kind of this gradient from something that is very big and loud, very full, to something that is not there at all and totally silent. So you have this range of kind of subtlety that you can approach. It's a great question on that. I hope that example kind of helped answer that question too.
Great, thank you, Mike. A question for the QTube really. I've purchased the course. How will I know if I'm amongst the first 20 to get the one-to-one? Well, we'll obviously let you know, but I can tell you that if you've used our link, you definitely are, because we still have some of those available. So yeah, but thank you to everyone that's signing up. It's definitely a win-win for everyone. You get access to a great course. It's great for Mike, of course, selling his course, and we also benefit through the affiliate partnership as well. So it's brilliant. So thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you guys. I mean, it really does mean a lot to me, and I'm glad that, you know, again, I get to kind of share this. The whole reason I wanted to make this course is that I've been teaching for a bunch of years. I have this clear system, this clear curriculum that I know works, I know gives a kind of concise process, and wanted to be able to share it a lot more with people. You know, so the pandemic kind of helped me see that in a way that I could actually take this and sort of spread it much wider than my current sort of platform. So I really appreciate it. And absolutely, I'll follow up with people as soon as I can, everybody who's purchasing the course, and just let you know directly.
Okay, cool. Someone is asking, well, it's not a question actually, it's just an observation to bear in mind, saying this was really fantastic. It would be great to do a similar one for game music and also sound design. So just something to think about for future reference.
Cool.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to jump to this question because the poor guy has written it twice now. He's probably waiting. He says, do you compose all your thematic material away from the picture and then arrange with picture, or in a different way?
Yes, precisely. You've nailed it. So that's a big part of this process, is that really the most creative composing happens away from picture. This is when I'm thinking through, how do I represent this character, this idea? How do I do that musically? And I'm also thinking of the different points of view that I'm going to need in order to represent that. So I come up with the theme, which is, and again, this is sort of covered more in depth in that free first unit. So feel free to go check that out. But this is sort of the foundation of that process. You come up with your theme. And I think of the theme as a very basic sort of lead sheet version of it. That's just maybe the melody and the chords or the progression, something very basic. And then the suite is this arrangement of the theme, which should represent the different points of view and the kind of arc of that character or that idea throughout the story. So the suite that I played, Lucy's theme, that's 4.25 minutes long, that's the suite of this theme arranged in different ways and providing me with different material. So that's the kind of basis of that narrative vocabulary that I'm going to use throughout. And then when I'm writing the cues, I'm essentially arranging the themes for the cues. So I'm taking that material, I'm moving it around, I'm coming up with these sort of counter lines or counter textures out of that initial material, because that's what's telling me that this is representative from a particular character's point of view. So absolutely, you come up with the themes and suites away from picture. That's the more creative composing, and then you're arranging that and adapting it to the picture.
Superb, thank you. This is perhaps a tricky one to give a short answer to. What's your criteria for instrumentation and sounds concerning storylines and scene moods?
Well, I would say it really depends, is the short answer. So I don't have a criteria of, like what instruments I can or can't use, but I'm really just thinking about what's appropriate for that story. So for instance, with Lucy's theme, I'm using this distorted music box. I'm doing that because she is a teenager who essentially is sort of losing her childhood, or that there's this veil or there's this distortion over her childhood. So I took an instrument that represents children or kind of innocence, and I put distortion on it. So it's a pretty kind of direct way of doing that. But you can think of this in other examples, like Dario Marianelli's brilliant score for Atonement has this sort of major use of the typewriter as a kind of percussive instrument throughout the score. And why? Because the whole sort of story, not to give it away, is essentially a memoir, and it's sort of being written. And so it makes sense for the story. It's inherently representative of that idea. So I think that's important to think about, kind of in the mechanics of it. How can I represent this story or this idea? You can use particular instruments or a particular kind of harmonic language. So if I'm trying to represent a happy child, I'm probably not using like obtuse extended harmony. It would be really difficult for me to do that. Whereas something that's much more sort of simple diatonic might be a lot easier to represent that. So I hope that helps. Hope that kind of answers that question for you.
Okay, great. What are the most common mistakes that you see with full-time composers scoring to film?
Well, full-time is a very broad description. But I'd say this also, I'm not here to, it's not my place to criticize any other film composer, because you can't judge a composer by their film music. It's a great piece of advice that I received, and the meaning behind that is it's not your music in the end. It's a collaboration. So it's not that the composer has full autonomy over the final product. They have to work with what's asked of them from their client. So what I don't think that there's really like, oh, I see this kind of all the time, in such and such. I think that's really, if you have criticism, like a couple of years ago, there was that brilliant sort of video essay on YouTube about the music in Marvel films. I think it's from the channel Every Frame a Painting. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. It's sort of the Marvel, the sort of symphonic universe. And he kind of addresses this, and sort of the music has become less and less sort of interesting, or more just background textures. That's really a product of kind of the studio, and being sort of risk averse. And then they sort of answered in kind in follow-up films, such as like Thor Ragnarok, I thought was then kind of a reaction to that, where there was a much more adventurous score for that. So I don't think it's really a question of like, what do composers do wrong all the time? I think if people are working consistently, they're probably doing something right. But I would say maybe what I do find young composers and people sort of at the start of their career doing sort of wrong quite often is a lot of what I covered tonight. I think it's not understanding what the story is, and often sort of scoring the picture rather than the story. So they're making decisions and changes in the music based off of what they see in the picture rather than what's actually happening in the story. So as a quick example, if I see someone open a door and I decide that needs a musical gesture, it might not at all, because when I make this big musical gesture to open the door, then I'm saying that is a really significant event, and it might just not be. So I think really just keeping the story in the forefront. I hope that helps.
Yeah, great. Okay, I like the door example. Yeah, that's cool. Okay, I'll make this, I'll shorten the question. To what extent do you think it's important for composers to learn about mixing, or should they just kind of pay someone to do it? What do you think?
Depends on the level, sort of both. So I'm decent at mixing, but I'm not Jake Jackson or Jeff Foster, So it depends on the level of what you're doing and what you, want to achieve with it. You should definitely have a good understanding of mixing and be pretty decent at it. And I think just learning that, at the kind of the last unit of the course is really sort of about that, is about trying to sort of polish that off and make it good. You need to be able to make a good demo, period. It's just what's required, because not that directors don't have imagination, it's because you're pitching against people who have amazing demos. And the thing that sounds the best is going to be the most appealing. So that's important, full stop. Do you need to be able to mix your own sessions? You go and record a 100-piece orchestra in Abbey Road. Do you need to mix that? No, and you shouldn't. I think if you're doing that, you can definitely hire someone who's better at mixing than you are. Even at a small scale, there's a lot of short films that I've done. Lucy's theme, I didn't mix that. I got Peter Gregson to record the cello on it. That's the only live instrument in that. And then I gave it all to a friend of mine who's a mixing engineer to do it. And it's a much better product than I would have done. So just like I wouldn't play cello in it, I can kind of play cello, but instead I got an amazing cellist to do it. If you have the opportunity to get somebody who's better at doing a job than you, then do it. So understand what you want. I think the same goes for, say, like conducting. It's good to have an understanding of what's needed so that you can better provide scores and materials for the people you're collaborating with. But do you need to be an expert? No. John Williams conducts, to a stopwatch, but no one in this chat is John Williams. I'd be surprised if he was in. So I just think of it that way, that you should really, have it to a good standard. And I think if you can mix a track that is sort of TV ready for like library music, and if you go on to any music library, like Bleeding Fingers or something like that, go listen to their tracks. You should be able to mix something that sounds that good. Because for that, it's rare that they have a mixing engineer go through kind of all these tracks. Most of them are just someone who's done it at home, submitted it, it's approved, now it's on the site. So I think that's a good kind of reference of the level of mixing you should be able to achieve.
Okay, cool, thank you. I'll just read this one verbatim. Hopefully you'll get the idea. In order to decide if the music is not redundant to the film drama, do you think in terms of contrast between film and music?
If that is about kind of talking more about like the story, then so I guess short answer, yes. I'm thinking about what is being told, or rather who is telling the story, which kind of craft. So if you imagine the composer is one of the sort of above the line creatives. So along with the writer, the director, main actors, sort of heads of department. So we're all at this imaginary round table telling the story together. And at different points, some of us are telling more of the story than others. So like the example I used with Darkest Hour and sort of this moment when Gary Oldman's delivering Churchill's speech. That is the dialogue, and the performance of the actor is the most important thing there. So that's where music needs to step back and stay out of the way a bit. It needs to play a very subtle supportive role. That's how I think of it, is in those terms of kind of how much of the screen is being taken up by a particular element. And music is one of those. So there's moments where music needs to tell 100% of the story. And then moments where the visuals are telling much more of the story. So I hope that helps.
Okay, great, thank you. This is really slightly different tack, but maybe you have some thoughts you want to share. But if it's off topic, feel free to say that. Do you have any advice as to how to break into such an oversaturated market, especially at the entry level?
Great question. And it's something that, everybody is always sort of curious. I'll share a brilliant piece of advice that was given to me many years ago by Michael Price, who is a fantastic composer based in the UK, big sort of TV, film. He's done quite a lot, and he's very generous with his time. Sort of, he really contributes to kind of the composing community. Michael came and gave a talk when I was a student and said, there's sort of three ways to break into the industry. Either you meet the next Steven Spielberg while you're in film school, or while they're in film school, and then they become famous and sort of bring you up with them. Or you assist a big composer, and after a bunch of years of doing that, you kind of take on a bit of their network. You start to do some projects, get recognized, and kind of get your foot in the door. Or the third way is you do something really cool in music, unrelated to film, get recognized for your music, and sort of brought into film in order to do that. So someone like Johnny Greenwood, can kind of do anything he wants in music. And his advice was you should do all three of these all the time. So I think that's the best way, really, is you should be doing a bunch of student films if you're at the very start. Student films are great because it gives you an opportunity to try a lot of things out and kind of really work on your craft. And thankfully, no one will see these films. So there's many student films I'm glad no one will ever see because they don't become famous. They haven't gone to big festivals or anything like that. So it's really a chance where it is low risk for you to really experiment. And that's such an important thing for you to try to figure out what's sort of your sound, and even just figuring out how to work with people. You know, you're going to make a bunch of mistakes of how you approach people and things like that. Work it out where it doesn't matter. You know, and some of those will get recognized and whatnot, but you know, obviously there's sort of like an Oscar and a BAFTA for shorts and for student projects and stuff like that. But I doubt many people in this chat could name, you know, the Oscar for student short for the past, you know, 3 years. So even we don't know. So I think those are really great because it is a chance for you to really develop your craft. And then assistant jobs can be fantastic. I assisted a bunch of different composers. I learned a lot from their systems. And I sort of picked and pulled the things that I liked the best. I learned the things that really didn't work within their systems. And now I have my system. You're also exposed to working on much bigger projects than you would normally have access to. And you learn a lot through that. So assisting can be great. You know, I think it's also important to sort of find the right fit when you're assisting someone, and kind of understanding like if the type of music that you want to do aligns with the type of stuff that you do. And so figuring out kind of, you know, where that can be a helpful mentorship and that kind of thing. And then just working on your own music. I think this is also really important. The things that you do outside of film music is where you get to kind of explore your craft more. You know, you're going to learn a lot more writing concert music or pop music or producing albums and that kind of stuff than you will writing for someone else's project, because it's not your music 100%. It's a collaboration. So I do think it's really important to kind of make your own music outside of film and put it out there. Let people know what you make. Let people know the types of things you want to make. You know, so I've followed this advice to a T. I've done plenty, probably nearly 100 different short films. You know, especially when I was in college, I was doing this all the time. I then assisted a whole bunch of different composers, and I wrote some concert music, and I put out my album last year. And that was a sort of big project for me to come forward with. That's now a business card that I can approach people and show this is the type of thing I actually want to make. So instead of having to show different projects where it's not really the thing that I wanted to do, it was compromised in some way. My album has no compromise. That is my music 100%. So I stand by Michael Price's advice, and I thank him for it. I share his advice continually.
All right, great. Thank you, Mike. All right, a fairly broad question. If you want to have a little go at this one, how do you decide the orchestration?
So orchestration, just as a kind of art, you know, it's a very vast and deep art form on its own, just like music production, you know, kind of getting really into the weeds of it's a whole world to explore. I think the best thing, I mean, really, you know, how do I decide? Well, it depends on what I think of it more like the right tool for the job, you know. So with Lucy's theme, you know, in the second iteration of that theme, instead of it being on the piano, which is more contemplative, I have it played higher in the cello's range, which is a lot more dramatic. And that's an intentional orchestration choice to show these different perspectives of that theme. I think the bigger question is, how do you learn this? How do you kind of develop those skills and those tools? And I think one of the best things to sort of start with, if orchestration is not something you're really familiar with, if it seems like this big daunting world, it is a big world, but the best place to start is just look at scores. It's a very passive activity. I recommend this to all my students. When you have a free hour or something, drop into the library, or you can go on IMSOP. I think Tchaikovsky is a great place to start. Tchaikovsky's orchestration is very clear, very neat. So it's really digestible. look at these instead of film music. I think more importantly, John Williams takes it from Tchaikovsky, so why shouldn't you? John Powell is taking from that. He's taking from Ravel. So go to their teachers. And I think if you start that, if you take 45 minutes or an hour and you just read through the score while listening to a symphony, then you're going to pick up so much, and you're going to start to develop and learn, okay, it's, that grouping or that instrument that makes that sound. Or, when the brass has a melody and then the strings are doubling, it can have this. It's such a broad world to get into, but it's a wonderful world. And the more you know, it's like you're with very limited orchestration, you're starting with kind of primary colors, and that's the only thing you get to paint with. And then as you develop it and you understand how to sort of mix them and combine them together, now you have every color imaginable, and it's a lifelong pursuit to continue to study orchestration. May we, never reach the level of Ravel, but always try. It's a lofty goal to aim for. So I hope that helps. I think that's, a good starting point. Go read some Tchaikovsky scores, listen to the music, and then build on to the ones that follow.
All right, great. Thank you. How's your stamina, Mike? How are you doing? You got time for some more?
Going good. I think I'll definitely have to wrap up a little before 9. But yeah, we can keep going. And there was another question earlier where I talked about sort of tempo, sort of shifting and finding musical solutions. Maybe it's good I sort of cover that now. And then we can jump into some more of these. So don't worry, I haven't forgot. So I'm going to just sort of jump back to this session just as an example. So I'm going to kind of ignore what's going on here. And let's just look at sort of a clean section here. I'm going to do it with this piano melody. So let's just clear this out and try to get something a little bit more clear to look at. This will be fine. So say I've got a hit point here, and my next hit point is here. And it's kind of in the middle of this bar. So it's a bit awkward. It's hard for me to fit this 8-bar melody into sort of nearly 7 full bars. So what can I do? I need to make this sort of fit in some way. So if I open up, let me get the key editor up here. Sorry, Cubase is being a little laggy, so we're going to hope that we don't crash. It's just because Cubase and Zoom do not get along. But so I'll play through this. So I know I'm going to need to make this sort of fit to the end. So once again, I got to kind of cut it to here. First thing I'm going to do is try to set this. If this is my kind of hit point, I want that to fall on a downbeat. So before I worry about tempo stretching and shifting or anything like that, I need to make the meter make sense. So just shift that back. So what does that mean? This bar is probably going to be a bar of 7/8, where there's going to be some bar of 7/8 within here in order to make this fall on the downbeat. So we'll keep just marker of 4/4. Maybe I can make a bar of 7/8 in here while the melody is sort of being held. And then let's make another bar of 4/4. So now this falls on the downbeat, but I know I've got to drop a beat somewhere. So let's open this up. I got to drop an 8th note. So the easy thing first, maybe I can shift that back a little bit. And now I can make that sort of fit into here. But again, this is going to be truncated to here. So I need to sort of clip that. So this might in itself have kind of solved it. So I can play through, see if this sort of feels awkward. So this little gap, losing the eighth note there, worked out quite well. It's not that noticeable, so I just need to make sure that my accompaniment kind of fits there as well. And with this sort of harp and music box texture, that should be fine too, because it's just sort of moving on eighth notes. So I think one of them won't be missed. So again, the reason I chose to do this 7/8 here rather than at the end is because this is sort of where I'm holding space and time. So it's a little bit more fluid. If I had done it in the middle of this busy melody, it'd be a lot harder for me to make that feel natural. So I'm sort of sneaking it in. Then let's try to make it so this harmony is going to have to fit as well. So let's open this up. Again, I'm going to need to sort of drop this and shift it. So let's make this a little tighter. All of this can move back, that beat. And then I'm going to lose this sort of resolution, but maybe that's okay. So maybe what I could do instead is make the resolution to the E happen sooner. And then let's see how this works along with the melody. So before the chords go, I forget exactly what the chords are, but I know it's an A minor, and then we kind of end up on an A minor back to E minor, E major. So it's sort of like a 1 6 4 5 1 for those theory nerds out there. So again, let me just adjust this bass line to sort of fit. I know this needs to hit the downbeat. So maybe I can just drop this one for a moment. I'll sort of leave it where it is, but that might work. Just gonna make that sort of in line. I'll leave that downbeat, it's fine. So I know this is kind of an option. I can try to drop that if it becomes too much of an issue where it makes it feel like it's continuous. And these lines are just continuous. So I'm gonna leave them that way. Just gonna chop the last bit. So now let's see sort of how this plays all together. Nothing. Sorry, let's get rid of the dialogue. So this I've kind of got a problem with. This is happening a bit too, I can feel that change. So I'm gonna either move it back, and if it's still a problem, then maybe I'll just delete it. And then if I'm going into a sort of downbeat directly after this, let me just trim all of these to, so I can just kind of repeat it. And we can see if it causes me any issues. Just down to the downbeat. Now we might have something that works a bit easier. So again, it's still a bit awkward. So maybe I convince us that this is a new downbeat by making a little line that can kind of continue up. Something like this. I'm just trying to find, again, a musical solution to sort of convince you that this is a strong beat. Something like that. I would play with this, obviously, to try to get it to make it work. Or, again, maybe I just try sort of muting it and see if that kind of helps me. But now this should feel a bit more continuous. And if the picture is going along with it, that's going to help me make the music sort of, it's going to convince the viewer that it works. Because we have the structure of it too. So that ending is fine. I'm not sort of missing that extra one. And again, the structure of the film will help me carry that over. So then just sort of wrapping up this point, if this hit point is still sort of off, then I would adjust the tempo. So once I've found a musical solution with a meter, then I can sort of fine tune that with the tempo. And that way the tempo adjustment is not going to be too different. So if, say, this was moved over just slightly, so that means that what's happening in the music here needs to, so let me try to, I forget what it would be to sort of lock the sort of SMPTE position of it in Cubase. But let me just trim the video at that point so we can use it as a reference. So say I need this to end together. So what's going on? I need to make a tempo shift. I'm going to put a node here at this point. And then we can see as soon as that raised it up a little bit, it became more off. So I'm going to take this below and sort of fine tune this until I get to the point where it can line up. And there's definitely a sort of direct way to do this where you can sort of time stretch it to a certain point and get it to fit. I forget sort of exactly what that is in Cubase, but this concept is the same. So now I've got 93.5 and I'm more or less lined up right onto it. You know, I could continue to fine tune that and tweak it, but that's how I'm going to get to that sort of hit point. Cool. And I think we probably got time maybe for one more question.
Are you sure? We have quite a few. I wonder whether we ought to consider perhaps, you know, doing another little session at some point. But yeah, I can choose randomly.
Yeah, we could do, you know, a follow-up sometime down the road as well.
Yeah, I mean, these questions, you know, the chat is going to persist, so we can come back to some of those questions later. And of course, if people are signing up to the course, then they'll be able to get questions to you through your Twitch sessions, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. And even if you're not signed up to the course, you can come on and join the Twitch.
Yeah, okay. People were asking, that was a relevant question. What's the Twitch handle, actually?
So it's, here, I'll throw it in the chat for you.
Cool.
So it's just twitch.tv/Mike_Ladouceur.
Alrighty.
Very simple. And while we're at it, I'm going to share another channel that I do with some of my best mates and colleagues. We do a channel called Score Connect. And so Score Connect is, at the moment, we're doing sort of weekly streams. And with that, we also do some sort of feedback and review sessions. And so it's me and 5 other professionals that we've all worked together on a ton of different projects. And with that, there's also a chance to sort of directly submit your work kind of every other week, and we'll give you some feedback on it. So that is twitch.tv/Score Connect.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mike. I think we'll draw a line under the questions there. Thank you so much. First of all, on behalf of the viewers and the community, thank you, Mike. It's been absolutely wonderful. 2 hours of your time. It's very generous, and it's been very, very informative. So, and I can see the appreciation in the chat. Perhaps you'll have time later to go back and sort of bask in the positivity in the chat there. It's all very nice. But thank you so much for that. And just to remind everyone that we do have a affiliate link in the description down below. So if you do decide to join Mike's Academy, which gives you access to the full course as it stands, but also access to all changes and additions to the course for life, which I think is absolutely fantastic. Through the affiliate link, you'll get a hefty 40% discount. You'll help us out a little bit at the QTube, and the first 20, well, it's less than 20 already, we'll get a free 1 hour one-to-one session with Mike. I'm struggling and I've not really been talking. I don't know how you've kept going, Mike. And just another opportunity to ask questions would be that Mike and I are both going to be at the Christian Henson / Spitfire Composers Walk in London on the 27th of this month. So perhaps some of you will be there. It'd be nice to meet you face to face. It's always really nice to meet people face to face. So come and introduce yourself. Let us know any questions. Don't be shy.
Yeah, absolutely.
And yeah, that would be really, really cool. Always happy to meet people. So yeah, we might do another session, but Mike and I will have a chat about that. But yeah, the course looks fantastic. A lot of hard work's gone into that, Mike. So I wish you great success, and I wish all of those people that are participating in the course, you know, great success as well. And you know, give us some feedback. Let us know how it goes, and we can spread the word.
Yeah, and also if you're grabbing some clips from the Q2, we'd love to see them. So once you kind of go through the course and you make these really polished products, and you can share it back into the community. You know, it's something, the more we share, the stronger each of us gets, the stronger we push each other. So I don't think of film music as being competitive. It's really collaborative. You know, we're having strength in a community is so important. And I've said it over and over again to my students, you know, the people who I've gotten the most work from are the people who I did my course with. You know, we've kind of shared that and needed to help each other out at so many different points. It's the more you can work together with other composers, the better off you'll be. So I think having communities like this and everything that you do, Brian, is really fantastic. It's such a valuable thing, really, to do and to be able to give this kind of information. So thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Mike. And thanks to everyone who's made nice comments in the chat about us as well, the QTube. So yeah, we'll have lots of new stuff soon, as always, and the library, which is free, of course, is continuing to grow on a very regular basis. I think we're up to about 36 videos covering a range of genres and different lengths and so on. So yeah, give us feedback on that as well, and let us know which videos you'd like to see more of, if you like, and which ones you don't want to see more of. And yeah, very, very open to your feedback, and try to accommodate it as much as we can. So, all right, Mike, well, thank you. I'll let you get back to your life.
Thank you guys once again so much for coming and being part of it. And thank you also to everybody who signed up so far. I'm really looking forward to working with you guys.
Yeah, and the technology hasn't fallen over. This is incredible. So it's a good sign, I reckon, a good omen. All right. Well, thank you, Mike. Have a good evening. Take care.
Thanks.
Thanks
You
a
too.
lot. Bye-bye.